This is a lesson on naming solids. We're going to focus in on polyhedrons, and more specifically, we're really going to focus on prisms and pyramids. So across the top of the paper here, or the screen, you see different three-dimensional objects. Some of them are prisms, and some of them are pyramids. And if you look down here, a prism has a polygon base. So you couldn't have like a circular base. You'd have to have like a base formed like a square like up here, or maybe a trapezoidal base or a hexagon for a base. Those are the some different types of polygons. Here there's a rectangular base, and here there's a triangular base. So those are some of the possible polygons, but it's a three-dimensional figure, and some of these are prisms and some are pyramids. So one of the goals today is to identify the shape and name it properly. And we're going to look at some specific names. So we're really going to match all of these with all of these and place them in the correct side of the paper, either as a prism or a pyramid. And so if you look at what I've written down for a prism, the base is a polygon, and the lateral faces, that means when you look around the shape, the lateral faces are rectangles. So the easiest one to think of for a prism is this right here, is just a rectangular prism. So as you see up here, the base is a rectangle, and then the faces, basically the sides, which lateral faces mean sides, the sides are all rectangles, so it's a prism. I think an easier way to distinguish a prism from a pyramid is to look for an apex or like a point. So like this is a pyramid, and we recognize pyramids from, you know, our history, our world history, but also we think of pyramids in elementary school too. So the difference is you still have a polygon base, but your lateral faces or your sides now are formed out of triangles. So if we look at this here, this has a trapezoid base, but if you go around it, all of the faces are rectangles, so we call it a prism. And this one has triangular lateral faces. They come to an apex, that point, so that's a pyramid. And this is a prism because it has a triangular base, but the lateral faces are rectangles. So to name these, we have a rectangular pyramid, so that would be here because the base, if you look up here, is a rectangle. And I'm going to just make those a little bit lighter so they're not so distracting. But you can still kind of, I like to use color to identify the base. So here is a trapezoidal prism. So these are the prisms, and this one has a trapezoidal base. This is a rectangular prism, so that goes with this. And since the base of this shape, as you see up here, is a triangle, we call that a triangular prism. And this base here, up here you see it in yellow, has 6 sides, so it's a hexagonal pyramid. So that is a summary of just naming pyramids and prisms. Another thing is really helpful, especially when you have to read, is knowing what all of these words mean and how they apply to a picture. So polyhedron, like I said, is a 3D solid with polygon faces. And the ones that we just saw were just 2 types of polyhedrons, prisms and pyramids. That's what we're going to focus on. Also in a polyhedron, we talk about faces. So all of the flat surfaces are faces. So like this cube has 6 faces. And the edges, well, the edges are just line segments, and they are, you know, they would be like if I took this red tool, this is an edge here. So it's where 2 of the faces intersect. And the vertices are just like the points, or the right here, where all like 3 faces intersect. So if I wanted to be a little more specific about the vertices, or clear, they're like right here. These are all vertices. So there's 4 on the top on this shape and 4 on the bottom. So in other words, a edge is just a segment, and a vertex is just a point. So before we go on, these are examples of prisms. Like this is a rectangular prism and a pentagonal prism. And this is a pentagonal prism because the base, and if I make that a little more see-through, that's the base because there's 2 pentagons. But if I pull that out of the picture, the other faces, we could kind of highlight one right here. They're all rectangles. So the faces are rectangles, and there's 5 of those. I'll just make that a little bit lighter also. So we have a pentagonal base, and then all the sides are rectangular. And these are pyramids. They have an apex. They have all their lateral faces are triangles, like that and that. And the base of this pyramid is rectangular. So this is called a rectangular pyramid. So just a summary, prisms have rectangular lateral faces, so like the sides, and they also have, polygon bases. And pyramids have triangular lateral faces, and the bases are also polygons. Another way to think about polyhedron names is by this general terms. Tetrahedron means there's 4 faces. Pentahedron means there's 5 faces. Hexahedron means there's 6 faces. Heptahedron means there's 7 faces. So we're going to practice a little bit with some of these. So here is this is a rectangular base, and it has rectangular lateral faces, so it's a prism. So we just call it a rectangular prism. But if you count all the sides, the top and the bottom and the 4 other faces, that's 6 faces altogether. So we just call it a hexahedron because it has 6 faces. Where this prism has triangular bases. In yellow, you see that. But it still has rectangular lateral faces. So it's a triangular prism. There's 5 faces altogether. So it's a pentahedron. And this last one was similar to the example on the first slide. The base is a trapezoid. all of the lateral faces are rectangles, so it's a prism, so we call it a trapezoidal prism. Another name for it is a hexahedron, because there's 6 faces altogether, the top, the bottom, and the 4 lateral faces. Now this is a pyramid, and its base is a rectangle, so we call it a rectangular pyramid. So there's the base and the 4 triangles, which makes it a pentahedron. And then this last one here, a little trickier. This base has 5 sides. If you look at it a little bit less see-through. And so that's a pentagon. And then when you look at the other faces, these are all rectangles, so that's still a prism. So it's a pentagon on the base, which makes it a pentagonal prism. But if you count all the different faces, the front, the back, and the 5 around, there's 7. And we did talk a little bit about this today. 7, the word for 7 or the prefix for 7 is hepta, so this is a heptahedron. So we're going to wrap up here with taking these solids on the right and placing them in places on the left. We're not going to go through the whole chart, but we'll do all 9 of these solids. So one way to think about this is maybe start all with prisms. So this is a prism right here that I'm moving around. So it has to go into one of these. And even though it's a rectangular prism, the name that you see over here is just the general name. So you have to count how many faces there are all together. So there's the right and the left, and then the 4 rectangles that wrap it. So a box, in other words, has 6 faces. So it's hexa is the prefix for 6, so it's a hexahedron. So kind of in that thinking, this right here has a pentagon base. So there's 2 of those, but there's 5 rectangles around, so the 2 bases and the other 5 lateral faces add up to 7. The prefix for 7 is hepta, so that's a heptahedron. And these are all the prisms that I'm putting on the left. So this one right here, it is a triangular prism, but another name for it is just classify its faces. So there's the top and the bottom and the 3 rectangles around. So that's 5 faces. So we call that a pentahedron. And that's the type of prism that has 5 faces, but there's no 4-sided prism. There is a 4-sided polyhedron, and that would be this shape over here, because it has a triangular base. It's a little hard to see that. See if you can sort of visualize that there would be a triangular base here. If I just take the kind of a dotted line and put it in for you, you could see there's a triangle base and then the 3 triangular lateral faces, altogether 4 sides. So that's a tetrahedron. And a pentahedron pyramid has to be a total of 5 faces. So that means the base has to be 1 face, and then there has to be 4 triangular lateral faces. And that's what this is. So there's 5 faces altogether. So you'll start to see a pattern. A tetrahedron pyramid has a triangle on the bottom and 3 triangle lateral faces. A pentahedron pyramid has a quadrilateral on the bottom and 4 triangle faces. So a hexahedron has to have a pentagon on the bottom and 5 triangular faces. Hepta means 7. So it has to have a hexagon on the bottom. So that would be 1 part, and then 7 or 6 triangular faces. So that would be this. And then this last one is, you have to look a little closer, has a 7-sided polygon on the base and 7 triangles. And I didn't continue the chart, but that should give you kind of a good feeling, something to study. So to summarize, you can name polygons in a variety of ways. You can name them, with a general name, and you can name them with specific names. So this, for example, is a rectangular prism, but we would also classify it as a hexahedron. And for right now, that's all you need to get started on naming and reading about polygons and solids and getting ready to do surface area and volume.